So it was right in this very spot right here that about 2 weeks ago when the show opened, there were 4 couples standing here. And I happened to overhear one of the men say, "This artist must really hate women." It was just then that I went and introduced myself as the artist. And that gentleman turned around and turned his back to me, hoping to become invisible. But really, that's probably the most honest reaction I got that evening. I believe art should be honest. I think really it should have the freedom to skip polite conversation and endure awkward silences. So tonight I'm going to share with you 6 honest confessions about this series entitled The Problem with the World Is Me. I must confess that I employed 12 slaves. A couple of years ago, I would have told you that slavery was something abolished back in the Abraham Lincoln era. But what I discovered after a friend involved me in his rockumentary film project is that there are more slaves today than any time in history. There's about 27 million. It is the #2 criminal activity still happening in every single country, including ours. Today's slavery includes forced labor, sex slavery, domestic servitude, and child soldiers. When you look at these paintings, you realize in each of them there's something wrong. For many of them, it's modern slavery. But my confession to you is that although now I understand slavery, I'm still part of the problem. You see, when I buy clothes, I don't know whether they've been made by children forced to work in sweatshops or not. I know that my computer contains a mineral that's been mined by slaves in the Congo. When I eat tomatoes, most likely they've been picked by migrant slave workers here in our own country. But you see, the problem with the world is not Abraham Lincoln, the problem with the world is me. My next confession is I have to confess that I prefer to look away. Friends, mentors, and hacker activists, have challenged me to see things that were there all along, but really I didn't have any desire to see. We're living in the most interconnected time in history. I'm virtually 24 hours from any point in the globe. I live just 2 clicks away from high-resolution images on Google Maps concentration camps in North Korea, where right now over 200,000 people are suffering. In the painting about North Korea titled The Bride of Un, you can see a Frankenstein-like missile coming out of the neck of this glamorous woman who doesn't have a nose. Living in Los Angeles, we're now within nuclear reach of Kim Jong-un, and we are interconnected. In my pocket, I've got a digital assistant who can tell me almost anything I want to know and many things I don't want to know. Siri, how many people have AIDS around the world?
Okay, GP, here you go.
Okay, Siri just told me 33.7 million people in the world have AIDS. But the problem with the world is not Siri. The problem with the world is me. And I have to confess that I'm not satisfied. There's a website called theglobalrichlist.com where you can put in your annual income and it computes where you sit in relation to the world's richest people. Well, if you earn more than $38,000, you're in the top 3% of the world, top 3%. I figured out I'm in the top 1%. I own a house on Prosperity Street. Literally, I live at the corner of Prosperity and Fortune. Yet, I'm not satisfied and I want a bigger house. I have the luxury today of deciding what food I want to eat, but my taste buds aren't satisfied. I have the luxury of driving a car with heated seats and surround sound, but I want the newer model. I have the luxury of walking into my closet and choosing from 100 different things to wear. I also have the luxury to take my kids to the happiest place on earth for the day, where it's easy to ignore the 2/3 of the world's population who don't earn that much in 2 years. The problem with the world is not Walt Disney, the problem with the world is me. And I must confess that I also crave violence. While I was still a teenager attending art school in Kansas City, I was held up at gunpoint with a gun against my head with 2 young 15 to 16-year-old boys. I think about how my life would be different today if I was carrying a gun for protection back then. Probably either I would be dead or those 2 young boys would be dead, or maybe all of us, for the $1 bill that was in my pocket. And here's the irony. While I personally hate guns, I have to confess that I still love watching a good action movie like Rambo. Many of the paintings in the show were inspired by Falling Whistles, which is a nonprofit that advocates for peace in Congo. When abducted children who are turned into child soldiers are too young to carry a gun, they give them a whistle. And they send them to the front lines to blow the whistle when the enemy is coming, to act as human shields. In several paintings here you can see the women are wearing these whistles as articles of adornment, but they're also remembering these innocents. But the problem with the world is not Sylvester Stallone. The problem with the world is me. I have to confess that I am an addict. My addiction is not booze, drugs, sex, or rock and roll, my addiction is to my own media cocoon. I live inside a warm trust of Facebook fans, Twitter followers, and YouTube viewers. And what's scarier is that I'm sharing needles with my kids, getting them hooked on their own iPods and iPads. Most days it's easier for me to escape into a virtual world entertained by iTunes, Netflix, Spotify, and Angry Birds. In the painting titled Glassy, the woman's eyes are replaced with screens, and the whole painting has shifted out of whack. Even before the internet, media ecologist Neil Postman said, "Americans no longer talk to each other. They entertain each other. They do not exchange ideas, they exchange images. They don't argue with propositions. They argue with good looks, celebrities, and commercials." What is eerily absent from my online friends, followers, and address book is the 2.5 billion people living on the edge of surviving. When I lived in my own Orange County bubble, I'd never get a status update that says, "Today I had to decide which of my children is selling sex slavery so my other children would have enough to eat," as represented in the painting, "My Kids Aren't Orphans." I don't receive personal text messages that say, "Can I borrow $5 for medication to keep my daughter from dying of malaria?" As in the painting, "Comfort Over Survival," where a skeletal figure has a tiny mosquito on the shoulder. I live in fear that someday my kids will grow up and question my actions. "Dad, why didn't you do more?" But you see, the problem with the world is not Mark Zuckerberg. All right, it might be Mark Zuckerberg, but it's also me. Finally, I have to confess that I buy into fake Photoshop beauty. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to create a documentary campaign with a relief organization called World Vision. I sat down with the wife of the CEO, Renee Stearns, and she gave me these photos you're seeing and asked us to share the story of a woman she'd met in Uganda named Margaret. Margaret's village had been attacked by Joseph Kony's Lord's Resistance Army, full of young kidnapped child soldiers. When the soldiers went to kill Margaret, they saw she was pregnant, and in that culture it was bad luck to kill a pregnant woman. So instead of killing Margaret, they cut off her nose, they cut off her mouth, and they cut off her ears, and they left her for dead. Some people found her and brought her to a hospital, and they saved her life, and they saved the life of her child. But they didn't save her from disfigurement. Margaret ended up recuperating at a World Vision Rehabilitation Center, but in a strange twist of fate, Margaret's attacker had also ended up at the same rehabilitation center. So the place that Margaret had seen as a safe haven was now a terror for her, so she ran away. But the staff of the center went and brought her back, and over several months, they talked to her about the concept of forgiveness. And they also worked with their attacker about the concept of confession and him asking for Margaret's forgiveness. Renee said that this was the most amazing thing she'd ever seen, that she witnessed a reconciliation between Margaret and the person who attacked her. You can see in the photo Margaret holding the hand of her attacker. And then the next photo here, you can actually see her attacker holding Margaret's child. Disfigured without a nose, without ears and lips, Margaret represents real beauty and forgiveness in a world of problems. Each one of these paintings in this room are Margaret. Some without noses, some without a mouth or eyes to see. These are some of the first paintings I've done in the last 15 years. And to be honest with you, I really don't want to sell them. Some of these are my confessions, and maybe some people, instead of buying, you should put your money in something else. But we've sold about half of them already. And I've met some wonderful collectors and some people who have really got this. So if one of these paintings ends up on your wall, and someone comes up and says, "This painter must really hate women," I just hope you would share the message of hope and forgiveness about a woman named Margaret.